Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the council meeting for the 28th of September 2021, which I now declare open. Although members of the public can't join us in person tonight, our meetings remain open to the public via the live stream on our website, and I extend a warm welcome to all of you who are watching online. Tonight's council meeting is being streamed through Zoom in light of the current COVID-19 restrictions. We remind you to please check the Department of Health and Human Services website for further information and updates on current COVID restrictions. On behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which Moonee Valley is located, the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay respects to their spirits, ancestors, community members and elders past, present and emerging. We also extend this respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Item 3 on the agenda is apologies and leave of absence, and we've received none for this evening. Item 4 is the confirmation of minutes, and councillors, I'll seek a mover and seconder that the minutes from the council meeting held on Tuesday, the 14th of September and Wednesday, the 22nd of September 2021 be confirmed. Move Councillor Sypek, seconded Councillor Bedio. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Item 5 on the agenda is declarations of conflicts of interest. Does any councillor have a conflict of interest in any item on the agenda this evening? If not, I will declare a general conflict of interest in item 10.1 for reasons previously disclosed to the CEO in writing. For that item on the agenda, the Deputy Mayor will take the chair. Item 6 is presentations, and councillors, do we have any presentations this evening? There being none, we'll move to item 7, petitions and joint letters. We have no petitions or joint letters this evening. Item 8 is public question time, and we have not received any questions from the community for tonight's meeting. Item 9, reports from delegated committees, and there are no reports from delegated committees. So we'll move on to section 10, council reports. Now, the first report is 10.1, 144 to 160 Keilor Road and 1 O'Shanassy Street, Essendon North. I've declared a general conflict of interest, so I will vacate the chair and the Deputy Mayor will chair this item.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, thank you. So as the Mayor's indicated, we're at item 10.1, which is 144 to 160 Keilor Road and 1 O'Shanassy Street, Essendon North, land in plan of consolidation 377377J, construction of a 6-storey building, removal of an easement, reduction in car parking requirements, waiver of loading bay requirements, and alteration of access to a road in a road zone category 1 amendment. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation, please.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Sharp. Thank you. Councillor Adams, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Chair. This application is for an amendment to an existing planning permit, MV 2662015A. The original permit involved a VCAT compulsory conference where an agreement was formed between the permit applicant and a number of objecting parties. Subsequently, Council resolved to support the proposal subject to the additional conditions agreed at the VCAT compulsory conference on the 18th of November 2015, a VCAT order directed a planning permit be issued. The amendment before us tonight seeks to amend plans, remove an easement, reduce car parking requirements, modify the preamble to remove the waiver of loading bay requirements, and alteration of access to a road in a road zone category 1. The officer's recommendation is to issue a notice of decision to grant an amended permit with conditions. It's quite a long list, so I will just speak to a few that the objectors highlighted in relation to the specific amendments of this particular permit application. I'll just start with the majority of changes in this proposal either face the street or are internally facing and therefore do not pose any overlooking concerns to the adjoining residential properties. The changes to the windows and balconies that face the adjoining residential interfaces at 2 Duffy Street and 3 O'Shanassy Street are detailed in the report. I'll just highlight that the 2.1 metre high northern boundary acoustic fence that was agreed to at the VCAT compulsory conference still remains. There will also be no adverse overshadowing impacts to the adjoining residential area to the north or beyond what was previously approved. With regard to the increased number of apartments, which is largely the result of an internal reconfiguration of the building layout and apartment mix to meet current demands for smaller and more affordable one-person dwellings, the additional space required has been taken from the common areas as opposed to a material impact to the size of the apartments. There's also been a net increase in community areas through the internal resident amenities provided, including an arcade, communal dining room, golf simulator, cinema/karaoke room and wellness centre. With regard to the car parking, this is a large development with a lot of dwellings. I can completely appreciate the concerns of neighbours in surrounding streets. However, there is a statutory car parking requirement of 254 residential spaces and the proposal allocates 261 residential spaces. Even after the removal of the shuffle car parking system, which loses 4 spots, this results in a surplus of 7 spaces. Since the issue of the original permit, the Keilor Road has been classified as a principal public transport network, a PPTN area, under clause 52.06, car parking of the planning scheme. This means that there is no longer the requirement to provide visitor parking on the site, and so the proposal seeks to remove all on-site visitor parking. I really appreciate Council's traffic and transport units work on this to reinstate as part of the conditions a total provision of 10 visitor car parks. Although I personally believe more should be provided in a development of this size, I appreciate the complexities of the compromise. With regard to the proposal deleting the preamble wording of waiver of the loading bay requirements, I'm just going to note that since this application was first approved, the statutory requirement to provide a loading bay on site was removed. However, it is important to note that the proposal still retains loading bays on site, which is great, given the amount of retail activity, size of the building and the number of dwellings. A couple of things I'm pleased to see as part of the conditioning is the canopy to the building entrance on Keilor Road be set back within the tidal boundary. In the proposal, the canopy would have protruded beyond the tidal boundary, so the canopy setback is great, as I think this will enhance street appeal while not compromising a clear point of entry from the street. I'm also pleased to see conditioned that all 6 redundant crossovers around the perimeter of the site will be reinstated to curb and channel as opposed to only 3 in the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Chair. Happy to concur with what Councillor Adams has mentioned. There are a number of changes to this development, but at the end of the day, they're all relatively minor and don't change the built or alter the built form. So I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? Councillor Razza.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Look, this is a rather large built form and quite proximate to residents in neighbouring streets. So I do sympathise with some of the overlooking concerns that residents have put forward. I just hope that it's of some reassurance to them that the planners have taken a lot of care to address some of the concerns to the extent that the planning scheme enables, and some additional conditions to strengthen the design and function of the final outcome, including some additional screening that was omitted in the plans has been included. So I hope residents who the new built form will be quite large and obviously quite noticeable, but hopefully residents can take some comfort from these additional measures to protect their amenity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Razza. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? No. Councillor Adams, would you like to close? Okay, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, and we'll call the Mayor back to the chair.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We now move on to item 10.2 on the agenda, which is the planning application. Bear with me. The planning application at 1068 to 1070 Mount Alexander Road, Essendon. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sharp.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Do I have a seconder? Councillor seeking a seconder for the officer's recommendation on 10.2. Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Sharp, do you wish to speak to the motion? Just got that microphone on mute, Councillor Sharp. Thank you. You're right.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This application is similar to the previous application in that it is an amendment. So there are a number of changes to this planning application. You can see from the report that the planners have been working to make sure that everything complies and is acceptable down that Mount Road corridor. So, yeah, as it's an amendment, I don't really have much more to say other than, support the officer's recommendation and their notes that it complies with the relevant requirements in that stretch and the DDO that is in existence along Mount Road.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Hodgson, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, this is quite a significant development along Mount Alexander Road, and I note that it is amongst, some similar buildings of similar scale that have gone up recently in the area. I took a walk around the area today to try and understand the scale, and I know that the officers have done a lot of work with the applicant to ensure that the additional story that's being sought through this amendment to the original permit is set back from the edge of the building and in sort of lighter tone materials to minimise the impact or bulk of the building and its appearance. So I think noting the efforts and the agreement of the applicant to those changes, I'm happy with the officer's recommendation in this one. Noting as well that the proposal does indicate that it's in a heritage overlay area, and that is the case that there was a heritage or a building in the area with heritage significance that's been relocated. So the officer's recommendation doesn't go into a lot of detail about the heritage impact, but the original application and permit did cover off on some of that detail. That's all. Thanks, ma'am.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. As Councillor Sharp and Councillor Hodgson mentioned, this application seeks to amend an existing planning permit. The most notable amendment, which has been touched on, is the addition of the 6th level. The original permit was for 5 stories, and the addition of another story has increased the overall building height from 17 point something metres. Sorry, the report has 2 different measurements, so but to 20.8 metres. The preferred maximum height per DDO 3 precinct C1 is 18 metres. While the original application for 5 stories complied with this requirement, the increase to 6 stories does not. However, the officers have noted the willingness of the applicant to work with officers to address council's concerns regarding the bulk and setback of the 6th level, and I appreciate the proactiveness of the applicant to work with officers to submit revisions, and am satisfied that the design response is suitable for the area, which already has 6-story developments approved in the immediate vicinity of the area. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Isa.
Mayor, thank you. Mayor, I'd actually just like to move a small amendment, which I'm just sending through, to condition 3. So I've just sent that through just to, I'll just read the amendment. I'll just read
the amendment. We'll seek a seconder. And then,
thank you. Yep. So the condition 3 to read, prior to the completion of the development, at the cost of the owner and to the satisfaction of the responsible authority, an information plaque / interpretive display must be erected on the exterior of the building at street level, which contains a brief written summary of the history of the former workers' cottage, as well as an image of the building representing its original form. The details and location of the plaque / interpretive display must be to the satisfaction of the responsible authority.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. So, councillors, Councillor Isa has just sent that through via email. So, the amendment, Councillor Isa has read out that full condition, but in that email, you will see it is the addition of the words exterior of the building at street level and deletion of the word site, and then the deletion of the words the date of its demolition. Does any councillors need any more time to absorb that amendment that's on the floor? If not, I will seek a seconder for that amendment. Councillor Adams. Councillor Isa, if you could just speak to the specific amendment, please.
Thanks, Mayor. So the history of this particular application obviously predates many of the councillors, including myself, who are currently on council, but it's obviously quite an important history for Moonee Valley and for residents around, because this site was the site of the historic cottage that's obviously now been relocated by council in several years ago. So this particular condition that was put on the original permit in 2015 obviously talks about the date of demolition of the cottage, which is no longer applicable because the cottage wasn't demolished. And also, I'm just taking the opportunity to beef up, I guess, in a very small way, that recognition and acknowledgement of the heritage building that was there previously. I did note that in 2015 that the planning advice that went, or the heritage advice that went to council at the time, was that on the basis of research, the desirability was that the cottage should be retained, and the heritage advice of the council's heritage advisor was that the cottage should be kept, needed to be restored and surrounded by a suitable setback for future maintenance once restoration has occurred. So it is quite sad for the community that the cottage was moved from the site, given that heritage advice. It's obviously a very significant element of Moonee Valley's built history. It's obviously not sad that the cottage was relocated, and so that outcome is of some benefit. But I do note that that advice to the advice was to not demolish it, but rather to retain it on the particular site. So the intention of condition 3, I think, was that there be a plaque within the foyer, and I think that the foyer might have changed sizes I've looked at the history of the plans, and from the original plan to now, the foyer is potentially a bit pokey in terms of being an appropriate site for acknowledging this quite significant history of the cottage, significant enough that the council invested quite a lot of money to relocate it. And I do just feel that some kind of recognition of the history on the exterior to the building and at street level would give it greater acknowledgement and recognition, due recognition. So I'll leave it at that for the moment, and happy to, I guess, respond to any comments that are made by colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Adams, you wish to speak just to the specific amendment?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. And thanks, Councillor Isa, for this amendment. The preservation of the settlers' cottage is one element that has been of huge expense to ratepayers. The heritage value of the cottage was lost anyway, because the more meaningful heritage significance is the actual location. So having an information plaque on the building exterior to commemorate the significance of this location is perfect. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Adams. Does any other councillor wish to speak just to this specific amendment?
Can I ask a point of clarification, please, Mayor?
Yes, yep.
This aspect of this application, this amendment, does not take into account previous points that have been endorsed by council. So can I please have a point of clarification that we are actually able to change a previously endorsed motion that is irrelevant to the motion at hand?
So you want to get a question through the CEO to the relevant planning officer. CEO, did you need Councillor Sharp to repeat that that point of clarification?
Yes, please.
We have an amendment in front of us that purely relates to an amendment of plans that were endorsed back in 2015, whatever year it was. The alternative effectively seeks to alter a previously endorsed motion of council from 6 years ago, which isn't in the purview of what we are considering tonight, I do not believe, but I would like clarification, please.
CEO, could you please seek advice on that?
I would like to refer to the manager planning, Mr. Purchase Barry, if Purchase is available.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the question and the point, Councillor Sharp. It is uncommon for an additional amendment to be brought which doesn't add specific value or address the amendment which is before council for an assessment. So the applicant hasn't submitted that as an amendment or part of their proposal. So it isn't on the floor per se.
Thank you. So effectively, we can't really be changing an endorsed motion of council back from 2015 based on the fly.
Is that another point of clarification, or that was just
asking? Is that what Mr. Berry is saying?
So point of clarification, again through the CEO, is...
Sorry, could I seek an adjournment, Mayor? I disagree with the advice given. I'd like to seek an adjournment for some discussion on that. Thanks.
Yes, I'm happy to seek an adjournment. Move Councillor Isa. A seconder for the adjournment, please. Councillor Tyson, those in favour. Shall I put those hands up? Those in favour of the adjournment, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Adams, Councillor Isa, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Seifert, Councillor Nation, those against. Councillor Sharp, the meeting will be adjourned for 5 minutes to clarify some information with the relevant officer. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the ordinary meeting of Council for the 28th of September 2021. We're currently hearing report 10.2. At present, we have an amendment on the floor that has been moved by Councillor Isa, seconded by Councillor Adams.
Sorry, Mayor, am I speaking or?
If you wanted to.
Thank you, Mayor, sorry. Mayor, thank you. Look, just to accommodate different views in the room that we discussed during an adjournment, and just to find a workable solution within the space of the confines of the meeting, I'm just going to both foreshadow an additional amendment, but just seek to withdraw this particular amendment.
Thank you. So Councillor Isa has moved a motion to withdraw the amendment. The second to Councillor Adams. Are you in support of the removal, the withdrawal? So I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour of withdrawing this amendment? And that is carried unanimously. Councillor Isa, you foreshadowed an amendment. So if you could please present your amendment.
Thanks, Mayor. So I'd like to move that the officer's recommendation be labelled as Part A, and that a new Part B be added that reads that Council requests that the information plaque/interpretive display, and perhaps I'll put in brackets there, referred to in condition 3, close brackets, must be erected on the exterior of the building at the street level to the satisfaction of the responsible authority.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. So we've got an amendment on the floor. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Adams. Councillor Isa, do you wish to speak to the specific amendment?
There was just a note there from planning, a reference to A3. So I'm not sure if it's condition A3, what that reference. Sorry, I was just sent a message in the chat there that it be A3, not just condition 3, but condition A3. So
we've got the amendment on the floor, so we're just going to have to run with that.
Yeah, perhaps someone might like to amend it to say A3 at some point after this, because my two amendments will be done at that point. Mayor, my comments still stand. Look, obviously, just to explain to people at home, there was just some discussion about the correct procedure for strengthening, I guess, this or making more relevant this particular condition. Since 2015, when this particular condition was passed, the house that's referred to as being demolished wasn't actually demolished, and the foyer in which it was to be, this interpretive display or plaque was to be displayed, has been altered by the inclusion of some additional bike racks, and it would just make the honouring the purpose of this condition is to honour this very significant historical cottage that was there, and the condition 3 as it stood, given the changes to the plans, just didn't do that in an appropriate way, given that we've moved on quite considerably in the 6 years, and there have been history has taken things in a different direction. So I think it's entirely appropriate that condition 3 be updated in this way, and that the amendment that was brought to Council gives us scope to then make sure that condition 3 is still appropriate. And I guess it's a little bit disappointing that planners might not have stepped in and preempted this and actually dealt with it, gone through all of the conditions and made sure that they were still relevant. But I'm happy that we've reached this situation where hopefully this way of doing it can meet the intent of finding the best way possible to recognise the particular cottage. Just with respect to the, I had put in the amendment with reference to condition 3, and it's meant to say condition A3. So if a colleague would like to perhaps move an amendment to make it A3 after I close off this amendment, if this amendment is successful, then that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Adams, wish to speak just to the specific amendment? Any other councillor wish to speak to this specific amendment? Councillor Sharp?
Thank you, Mayor. I won't be supporting this amendment because I don't think that we should be making changes to a previously endorsed position of council on the fly as we are. If you want to start talking about the settlers' cottage, it was hugely important to our community that it was not demolished and that it was moved. And we certainly set about doing that a number of years ago, and we were very lucky that the cottage was actually donated to us and that we were able to move it. So I heard the comments around how it cost us so much money. There was so much community feedback that they wanted that cottage saved. So if you have a look at our history and you have a look at our heritage, our people, our community want to continue seeing our heritage, and we've been able to relocate it into Woodlands Park. Based on the amendment, I'm only talking about that because of previous comments that councillors have made who weren't actually here when the situation unfolded a number of years ago. But aside from that, I won't be supporting the amendment because I don't believe that it's lawful, and I don't believe that it is part of the application. Well, it's not part of the application that is in front of us.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Any other councillor wish to speak to the specific amendment? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. To the point of whether or not it's lawful, I think we've resolved that through Councillor Isa amending the way that this is being requested through the actions of the responsible authority. I personally just think that it's very usual, it's very common for commemorative plaques to be located on the outside of buildings, and I don't see any problem with clarifying in this instance that that is what we would like to see as a council. I think I don't doubt that the community is really very grateful that we still have and can look at and visit the workers' cottage, but it has been removed from its original location, and I think that having a commemorative plaque to note that original location is only going to enhance that streetscape, because I don't know if I'm the only history nerd in the room, but I really love to stop and read commemorative plaques, and one with an image on it in particular would be really great, and I think would add to the streetscape. So I would hope that the applicant who already needed to do a commemorative plaque won't mind mounting it out on the street where everyone can see, rather than in the building where only the office tenants would have that opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other councillor wish to speak to the specific amendment? If not, Councillor Isa, wish to close?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Hodgson, for articulating things so well there. That's exactly the intent of this particular motion, and I do believe that we've resolved the debate about whether something is lawful or not by making this as a Part B to the motion. And the intent of this is exactly as Councillor Hodgson so eloquently put, is to allow and to ensure that the good work that was done in saving the cottage and we could see at the time that the public interest and the importance to that to the community, and that that is recognised in a way that all members of the public can appreciate by being at the external at the street level of the building. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. I'm putting that specific amendment to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Adams, Councillor Isa, Councillor Nation, and councillors, if you just keep your hands up again. Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Adams, Councillor Isa, Councillor Nation. Those against? Councillor Sharp, Councillor Seipert, Councillor Byrne. That amendment is carried. We move back to the substantive. At this stage, we've had our mover, Councillor Sharp, seconder, Councillor Hodgson, speak. Councillor Adams has spoken, and Councillor Isa, you still have an even 3 minutes on the clock.
Mayor, can I please move an amendment?
Yes. Councillor Byrne, what is your amendment?
Thank you, thank you, Mayor. I would like to move an amendment to the Part B to say in brackets, as referred to in condition A3.
So we have an amendment on the floor, which is just the addition of the number 3 after A. Is that correct?
A3. So at the moment it reads as referred to in condition 3. It needs to read as referred to in condition A3.
Gotcha. All right. So we have an amendment moved by Councillor Byrne, which is the addition of the letter A before the number 3 in the Part B of the substantive. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Tyson. Councillor Byrne, do you wish to speak to the specific amendment?
Thank you. This was obviously spoken about when we were speaking about the previous amendment. We just need to make sure that we do it correctly. So it's the amendment obviously passed, but we just need to make sure that it's correct. So this one, I think, is pretty straightforward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Tyson, wish to speak to the specific amendment? Any other councillor wish to speak to the specific amendments? No one else has spoken. I'll put that specific amendment to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Bedio, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Adams, Councillor Isa, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Nation. Those against? Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sypek. That amendment is carried. Move back to the substantive. At this stage, they've got Councillor Sharp spoken as the mover, Councillor Hodgson as the seconder, Councillor Adams has spoken, and Councillor Isa, you still have 3 minutes on the clock.
I'll pass, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor. After all of what was going on with the amendments and whatnot, I think we sort of did lose it. We spent a lot of time speaking about where a plaque was going. But for me, I won't be supporting this application. I still think that as a council, we spend a lot of time deciding on heights and stories for, what goes into our planning scheme and DDO3. And at the end of the day, it was approved for 5 stories, and this amendment, whilst I feel like there's almost a bit of just brushing over, it's only an amendment, I feel I've heard, or that's what's sensing it's coming across. It's not the planning application, it's already been approved. This is only just a little bit more. But I see this as an overdevelopment. Our DDO3 says that it should be 5 stories. This is 6 stories. It's going 1.7 metres over the height of what it should be. And if we start letting these creeps continually come in, then this is I think this is what our community doesn't want. Our community doesn't want to see the creeps against what our planning scheme says. I'm someone who doesn't agree in overdevelopment, and I feel this is exactly what that is. So I won't be supporting this because I don't believe it's compliant, and I don't believe it reflects what we should be doing with our developments. This site, happy for it to be developed, happy for what it currently is, but I feel like it is pushing the boundaries more than I'm happy with, and more than what I think the community would be happy with. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Tyson.
I feel in a similar way to Councillor Byrne, and I won't be supporting it. I think a big issue for me is the car parking requirements and the fact that the amendment's not compliant with that, and it's about nearly half of what it should be. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. I concur with Councillor Tyson and Councillor Byrne. I think, as Councillor Byrne said, we have a DDO applied on this area for a reason, and that was developed through consultation and for a lot of work of our officers, and to just go against that sets a precedent, I feel, that developers can continue to reach for more and more through more amendments. And likewise, we've seen a lot of developments come back to us since the introduction of the PPTN, which is the Principal Public Transport Network, which waivers significant numbers of visitor car parks, and in particular under 5206 of the planning scheme, the car parking requirements make significant dispensations for that. And we've seen a lot of applications come back to us with amendments to reduce car parking. We have a significant car parking problem in our city. So ideally, we'd like to see more car parks in these developments. So for those reasons, I can't support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Sypek.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was back in history when this application first came to fruition 7 years ago. Yes, I was there, and I was there when the cottage got moved, and I was also there when there was great public outcry over this cottage. And I totally agree, the cottage was saved. I think that was a part of Moonee Valley history that was saved, which is fantastic. I'm just perplexed that we spent half an hour talking about where we're going to put a plaque. What a first world problem we had there tonight, Mr. Mayor. It was sensational. But the biggest thing here is the actual application. The application, I believe, to me, was a 50-50 scenario. I'm sort of still swaying which way I go. So I've heard half our colleagues talk about it. I'd like to hear everyone's comment on it before I make my final decision. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. I actually think everyone has spoken. Does any other councillor wish to speak? I've got everyone ticked on my list. So Councillor Byrne, mover of a carried amendment, right of reply. Councillor Isa, mover of carried amendment, right of reply.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll just look. I just wanted to respond to Councillor Sypek's comment. I mean, obviously, the discussion about the technicality distorted the length of time that the amendment was worth. But I think the point made is that the history was worth something, and in moving the amendment to make sure that that's recognised in a very public way, it was to recognise and acknowledge the work that previous council had done to ensure that that cottage was preserved. So I guess I don't feel that the criticism is justified in terms of criticising the attention that be given to discussions about a plaque, because the whole point of it.
Point of clarification, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Sypek, what's your point of clarification?
I wasn't criticising, I was just making a statement.
Councillor Sypek, a point of clarification is an opportunity to ask a point of clarification on the report or the move of the motion. It's not a chance to justify decisions or statements that you have made. That point of clarification does not stand. Councillor Isa.
Thanks, Mayor. Certainly the discussion was longer than intended, but the point of the discussion is to recognise the importance that the cottage had for the public. At the time, there was a huge petition. This was a huge issue for Moonee Valley. A lot of expense was put into it, and I do think that the recognition that is due is worth us taking the time right now to make sure that the cottage is recognised in a dignified way, which is the point of the amendment. Look, I didn't really speak to the substantive motion, but I'll just take the 40 seconds I've got just to say that, look, I appreciate DDOs being extended in this way, but I appreciate the concerns around that, but I also appreciate that the planners have put in a lot of effort to make sure that the setbacks are strengthened, to make sure that the bulk is minimised in this way. So I think I'm comfortable with the overall result of the application. I think that the planners did work very hard and really pushed to make sure that the setbacks were much stronger than the applicant had wanted.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Sharp, right of reply, mover of the original motion. So I'll put the substantive to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Adams, Councillor Isa, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Hodgson. Those against? Councillor Bedio, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Nation. That motion is carried. We'll move to item 10.3, Living Libraries Infrastructure Grant Application, Ascot Vale Library Works. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bedio. Sorry, Councillor Bedio, hand went up. Councillor Hodgson, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, this is another opportunity that we have to apply to the State Government Living Libraries Fund for assistance in redeveloping one of our very much loved libraries. The officers are requesting that we approve and in principle commit to the development, renovation and development of the Ascot Vale Library. Ascot Vale is one of our smallest library sites. We've got the opportunity here. It actually does have a second level, which is inaccessible at the moment. There's money in our budget, which we were able to announce earlier this year to do some design work to get that ready for construction in the next few years, and being able to apply to the state government for up to $1.5 million to support that project, to more than double the floor space at Ascot Vale, and to provide, many more services to a very a library-loving community down there. We have more than half of our Moonee Valley residents are members of our libraries. We know how well loved they are. Ascot Vale presents some really unique challenges in terms of the small floor space that they do have and accessibility and being able to run services. They have very few study spaces down there. This is a fantastic opportunity to, as I said, more than double the floor space and the opportunities for our community to spend time in the library, to run programs in the library and to get what they need out of that library service, which I think is really wonderful. And it's really fantastic that we're taking this opportunity to get the state government funding support to deliver for our community.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Bedio, wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor, and yes, fully concur with Councillor Hodgson. I think this opportunity is fantastic and we need to take full advantage of this. The Ascot Vale Library is one of the smallest libraries, or is the smallest library in the municipality. It's at 220 square metres. To put that in perspective, in between lockdowns, you're only allowed 10 people in there at a time. And apparently that causes some significant issues during story time, because apparently with all the mums and their prams causes some OH&S issues. So I am really excited for the opportunity for what we can come up with in terms of a design. Officers have flagged a new youth space, an outdoor space. The potential design in this recommendation is nearly 3 times larger. So they already do an amazing job there with the small space they have. Imagine what our library services team could do with 3 times that space. So more than happy to support the officer's recommendation. And I really hope our colleagues can support us here as well.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Isa?
Yeah, all 3 Moonee ward councillors are in concert on this one. We certainly would like to see Ascot Vale Library fulfil its potential as a community hub for both library programs and other ancillary study and community and council programs. At the moment, there are no public amenities. My colleagues have spoken about some of the crowding issues, the overcrowding issues during particularly story time and other programs. The opportunities that are available at the Ascot Vale Library are quite constrained at the moment. And Ascot Vale is a large suburb. I think the population of Ascot Vale is the largest in our municipality. I might have that out of date, but it certainly used to be. And Ascot Vale Library is possibly our smallest. I'll probably be pulled up on those statistics later, but I'm willing to stake that claim here. The other interesting thing is that the Ascot Vale Library is surrounded by young families, so there are lots of young children, and it's also it's very proximate to the Ascot Vale housing estate. Obviously, older people, more vulnerable people, people with disadvantage make a great use of the public resources at the library. And so we need to make sure that it can absolutely fulfil the needs of our large Ascot Vale and diverse Ascot Vale community. Just interesting, in the report, it did talk about the Ascot Vale housing estate development and made the interesting note that the estimate for the timeline for that particular development has now been pushed out to 2036 to 2041, which it's the first time I'd seen that, which is, I guess, will be of interest to people in the area. But it does mean considerable delay in terms of any upgrade to facilities for people in Ascot Vale, and that's quite significant when we're looking at trying to upgrade this library. Obviously, this is just an application for a grant at this stage, so there are no promises that we'll get the grant, but we're putting our best case forward and hoping that we can improve Ascot Vale Library in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor. I will definitely join in with the Moonee Ward councillors here and be supportive of this grant. I think that this is a really good example of when we are shovel ready for projects and we can put in for grants like this. I think it is it's a big project, but it is extremely important for the community. It is one library. I love the libraries, but it is one library that I don't go to often because it is so small and I can't take my pram in. But they do such a good job with the space they have, but at the end of the day, they just don't have the space. So it absolutely needs to happen. The community will benefit from it immensely. And I think that post-COVID, we're going to really realise how important, if for people who haven't already, realised exactly how important our libraries are as a free service for our community. They're great. And I think that the Ascot Vale Library deserves to be bigger, and the people of Ascot Vale will really enjoy the benefits if we get it. So we just need to make sure we do a really good application and hopefully have some good news in the near future.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? If not, Councillor Hodgson, do you wish to close?
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just make the comment, you know, my councillor colleagues have made some really excellent points that I think are a real strength of what this grant application will be able to demonstrate in terms of the need for this area. I made the comment in my speaking that the second level was inaccessible, and by that I mean literally you cannot get up there. There's not even a staircase, let alone a lift. So I would also just highlight that the officer's report indicates that this renovation, if we get the grant and are able to move forward with the project, also will, in terms of the asset of the library for Moonee Valley, really improve the value of that, not only for the community, but, you know, on an asset level as well.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Report 10.4 is Councillor Expenses, Quarter 1 through 4, 2020-2021. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Byrne. Councillor Isa, do you wish to speak to the motion?
I wasn't intending to move it, Mayor, so I don't have any notes prepared. And obviously the expenses are something that we make sure is conveyed to the public, but to fulfil our desire to be fully transparent. And we have an expenses policy at council that governs the way councillors can be reimbursed for various things, whether it's phone calls or travel for conferences or membership to a particular professional association that's related to being on council. So there are some very strict rules about the expenses that we're allowed to claim, and it's really important that we're transparent and honest about those expenses and make sure that our community can see where we are, I guess, incurring those costs. And it's never popular to do that, but I think it's, you know, it's absolutely what we owe our community to make sure that we are really upfront about that. I do just want to make one comment though, that I noticed that there have been no childcare claims made, and I do just want to reflect on that, and probably from quite a personal perspective too. When I was a councillor back in 2007, I had 2 young children, and I did make some childcare claims at one stage, not very much, just I needed to do something, needed my children cared for, and did make use of the childcare expenses policy, which was quite new at the time in 2007. At the subsequent election in 2008, there were some threats made about bad media towards me because I had incurred those costs, and it really put me off ever using that particular policy ever again. And I just really want to support any councillor who is in our current council who may have young children, who perhaps has been hesitant to use the childcare part of our policy. It's there because it's a really legitimate cost that working parents, and although it's predominantly women, it's not always women, so working parents may need to make use of. It's a very modest and very tightly controlled policy that we have. It may just be that parents may need a babysitter during a council meeting or for part of a day when undertaking council duties, and these are legitimate expenses that disproportionately impact women, and I really just want to support my colleagues should they wish to make use of that childcare provision. And anyone who wants to criticise a candidate in the future because they have young children needing care can come and discuss the matter with me, and I will tell you what I really think about barriers to women participating in politics. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Byrne, wish to follow that? So wish to speak to the motion?
How do I possibly follow that? What a speech, Councillor Isa. Well, I'm sort of a bit thrown. I'll start with what I was going to say, which was that it's 12 months worth of expenses. So we're obviously open and transparent here, and it just shows everything, even from last council term. So have a look online. I feel like expenses are something that we should own. I wouldn't claim an expense unless I was happy to own it. I've been to a conference, my phone and the laptop and whatnot that I use is on there, and I'm sure that everyone else is the same. So if anyone wants to question anything on any of the councillor expenses, I'm sure people will be more than happy to speak at it. As I said, it's very open. In terms of Councillor Isa's comments, I'm not exactly sure who they were directed towards. There's obviously a few of us here. I obviously have 3 young kids, and I must admit I'm probably possibly a little bit disappointed in myself in a way for not using it. I haven't used it probably for that exact reason. When I first started on council, that people do unfortunately come after councillors for using any sort of childcare expense, which is really disappointing. And it was quite funny today, my husband, who is a construction worker who's not working because of the lockdowns at the moment, when the 3 kids were running around, I'm like, I just need to do some council work. I was like, how in the world do you possibly do this without him there? So it is something that we do. I feel like we balance the best we can, but maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should just say, you know what, this is actually a really important role for the community, and having an expense to prepare for council work is allowed under the Local Government Act. They've actually strengthened it in this Local Government Act, and is something that, you know, I'll look into. Councillor Isa, how does that sound? And Councillor Adams. But yes, council expenses there. Everyone have a look. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? If not, Councillor Isa wish to close. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Report 10.5 is award of contract number 20/312 Oracle SaaS Finance and Procurement System Implementation Services. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Tyson. Councillor Bedio, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. For those at home, SaaS is software as a service. Officers have undergone a public tender process to find a vendor to support the implementation of our new Oracle software as a service finance and procurement software. This is the IT software that will allow council to run a lot of its functions in relation to finance and procurement and improve on those functions within council. The procurement, the public tender and the officers are recommended that we put forward All About Expert Australia as the preferred tenderer for this application. The applicant has a lot of experience in doing similar rollouts through other local governments across Victoria, and I'm happy to back the officers on this one.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Tyson, wish to speak to the motion?
Not much more to add, Mayor, apart from that it went through an extensive process and had a panel of 5 or 6 of our senior staff, and well done to them.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? If not, Councillor Bedio wish to close. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Report 10.6 is response to notice of motion 2021/29 community facility hire. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a motion. I just have to hang on, pull it up on screen. Sorry. Get my emails. Motion would read, point A, apply the commercial hire categorisation to non-government education providers hiring a council facility for the purpose of undertaking a Victorian Certificate of Applied Learning VCAL program. B, make no other immediate change to the current fees and charges categorisation relating to non-government education providers, and C remains unchanged.
There's no C in the original motion.
No C, hold on, sorry. I was just reading the alternative that was sent to me.
Maybe just read from the, do you want to read the point C?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just getting it up for, yeah, there's a point C. Request CEO completes a further review of the community facility management policy by 28th of February 2022, including but not limited to. So that's in the original motion.
Yes, yeah, okay, thank you. And the Deputy Mayor's just made a point. So it's an addition of a point A. A then becomes B, and then B becomes C.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yep, that's all right. Councillors, we're across that alternative. I'll seek a seconder for that motion. Councillor Sypek. Councillors, the content of the report just specifically references non-government entities and community groups. The point C in this motion is in regards to future work on a review of fees, including commercial fees. I will be declaring a conflict of interest, which I didn't have on the content of the report. But the subsequent action in point C is a review of commercial fees and charges, and I'm obviously a director of a company that pays commercial fees at council facilities. So on that basis, I'll declare a general conflict of interest, and we'll have to get the Deputy Mayor to chair the remainder of this item. In the instance that this motion is lost, I would still keep that conflict of interest, because once declared, for any subsequent motions, and then we'll come back in for item 10.7. And councillors, that's not something I could declare up front, because there was no content in the report for which I had a conflict, but that point C specifically asking for a commercial fee review. So I will step out for a conflict of interest, and Deputy Mayor, you will be chairing this item.
Thank you, Mayor, for that pleasant surprise. So I think we have a motion on the floor from Councillor Sharp, seconded by Councillor Sypek. Councillor Sharp, would you like to, have I got that right? Sorry, Councillor Sypek. Yeah. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the officers for getting this report back to us. Obviously, it's well in advance of what my notice of motion requested 2 weeks ago. Unfortunately, 2 weeks ago, a lot of hullabaloo was created around me requesting a report on this issue. A lot of misinformation was put out there around what effect this will have on local schools. I said at the time in the council meeting that it would not have any effect on our local school community. However, councillors beg to differ, and that is fine, but I think that this report vindicates my position wholeheartedly. The only provider currently that is a regular hirer of council community facilities is an independent senior secondary school that offers a Victorian Certificate of Applied Learning. Now, I understand, education, all the rest of it is vital. It's core of our society, but our kids go from kindergarten, which is council provides kindergarten. It's heavily subsidised by both state and federal governments. Our children then move on to to primary and secondary school. We aren't subsidised by state or federal governments to provide any primary or secondary school education, because that is the responsibility of state and federal government. So my motion requests that at the minimum, a provider such as Vale is charged the commercial rates, because I really, in my opinion, cannot justify to our ratepayer that they are subsidising a form of education that is not council responsibility. Also, any occupation of our pavilions limits any other of our local schools or organisation using said or any such pavilion. So it's not a matter of wanting this provider to be ousted, but I honestly believe that we should be charging them the correct rate, which I believe is a commercial rate, because it is not our council responsibility to providing any form of secondary education. So it's been very disheartening that this motion was convoluted and morphed into something that it wasn't 2 weeks ago. But on the upside, I've had many contacts from many of the local schools. So I've been able now to chat myself to mainly primary schools that have contacted me. And it's been great to be able to chat to them. And now I have contacts with those schools, and I'll be very happy to ring them tomorrow to let them know that this report is on our website and they should have a look at it, because it was not intended to affect them, and it was not ever going to affect them. Suffice to say, what it morphed into last week at the end of 2 weeks ago, and at the end of the day, I was requesting a report. In anything we do, in any of our deliberations as a councillor group, we need the information in order to be able to make the correct decisions. So I requested a report. That's what we have in front of us, and what every single statement that I made last week has been vindicated, because it's all here in this report. So rather than morph something into something that it wasn't, we now have a report in front of us. So I'm very happy to support the officers, and again, I thank them for their hard work in this. I certainly did not expect them to turn this around so quickly, and certainly did not expect them to work all weekend on this report. But no, understanding that we want to get the bookings out and sorted for next year, no problems, but I wish to thank them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak to the motion? No. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Sharp, you just contradicted yourself. Non-government schools does include independent Catholic and VCAL education providers. And with respect to CEDA, it is a registered charity and not-for-profit organisation and the largest provider of VCAL. I'm absolutely devastated that an organisation that fills a gap with our most vulnerable teenagers who do not fit the VCE mould are being targeted in this way. It is absolutely disgraceful, and I won't be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Isa.
Deputy Mayor, I'd like to firstly foreshadow an alternative, if I may, it should, in the event that this motion fails. Look, if this report had just been about a review of fees and to whom what applies and when, it would make sense. Regular reviews of fees and charges are normal and necessary. But the problem here was that the review was initiated by targeting the use of council facilities by school groups. And the story seems to have been generated that council hires out a pavilion to a school that uses this facility at an undeservedly cheap rate, costing council money to the exclusion of more deserving community groups. And based on that, the review was urgently undertaken of fees and charges. Now, in that particular narrative, a school using a council facility is seen as a problem, on the logic that councils don't run schools. Well, councils don't run scouts or theatre companies or swimming competitions or residents associations, but we hire out our facilities to all of these groups for all of these functions. So the counter story is that there's no problem with council hiring out our facilities to schools, any schools that want to use them. They are a hirer like any other group. Secondly, in the story that was put forward, schools that are not run by the government should pay commercial rates. And in this motion, that a school that offers VCAL should pay commercial rates. Now, this bears a misunderstanding about schools. Primary and secondary schools are not commercial entities. The school that's of some focus in this debate is not a commercial entity. Like all schools, it's not for profit. Its students and their families have been hit hard, like all students and families across the state have been hit hard by the pandemic. And like many non-government schools, it's found ways to reduce fees for students, and in this case by reimbursing some of the already modest fees to families. Now, the third misconception is that this particular school is using one of council's pavilions at a community rate is costing ratepayers money. Well, of course, it's the opposite. The school is paying council money, generating revenue that we can spend on the community. And the final part of this erroneous story is that because this school is using the pavilion, others are missing out. The school uses the pavilion throughout the week in term 1, but I understand that there are gaps in the timetable from term 2 onwards, and there's scope for others, and shared use can be pursued through conversations with council officers. There are also other pavilions empty during the day and generating no revenue for council. So to the original story, and I might just anticipate a slight extension, Deputy Mayor, if that's okay, I'll try to finish. There's in fact a clear counter story, and that is that a not-for-profit school with many students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who thrive on practical learning through VCAL pays council good money at a reasonable rate to hire a pavilion that would otherwise sit empty for hours each day. This is a positive story, it's a good story, and it is a story I'm so pleased that Moonee Valley City Council can tell. And that's why I'm foreshadowing an alternative motion. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor. For those people who watched last fortnight, I declared a conflict of interest on the notice of motion because I was seeking some further information. I work in when I'm on leave, extended leave, but I have worked in a facility where university students come in, but it's not, I've been advised it's not classified as an education facility, even though there is education that occurs within the facility. So that is why I am participating in tonight's debate. I won't be supporting this motion. There's something that sits really uncomfortably with me for this whole piece of work, to be honest. I feel like we're basically saying, if you're a VCAL student, if you do things a little bit differently, we're not going to let you use our facilities, or no, sorry, we won't let you use them at the non-for-profit rates. You have to pay more. And we need to be helping. I feel like, if anything, we should be on the other side of this, and we should be helping. It's not like we built the facility to cater for VCAL or for schools or for anything else. We built them to what we needed for, in this case, for Cross Keys, for football and for cricket, and soccer and cricket. And it just happens to be that after the VRQA, you know, they were able to get accreditation to be able to go in there in a time that it wasn't used. So it's not like we're saying, let's go and spend millions of dollars to be able to fill a gap that the government's not fulfilling, or that someone else isn't fulfilling. There were facilities that have been left vacant, so we're purely filling them. And I actually think we should be doing this more. We have so many there are so many people at the moment that can't be in a room together because of COVID restrictions or whatnot, and there's probably going to be an absolute increased demand for facilities. And if we have them, our sporting facilities that are used after hours and on weekends, that are available during the day, then like, we should actually be saying, hey guys, we're here to help. That's what we're here. We're as a council, we had these facilities anyway. No, you don't need to pay through the roof. You're not a commercial provider. You're non-for-profit, or, you know, however it might work out. But I just feel like this is a really ugly motion, and I won't be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Bedio.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, firstly, I want to thank Councillor Sharp for bringing this initial motion up a fortnight ago. I think the report, and I supported it, and I still stand by the report as being really valuable, in that we need to look at for-profit providers. We need to look at the utilisation of our pavilions, and who's getting the value from that use. In looking through this report and doing some of my own research, I feel it might be a little unfair to point out CEDA. CEDA provides an educational facility, an educational program for kids who perhaps learn differently to the majority. They're very, I think the word's kinesthetic. They work with their hands. They are involved in trade. They like sport. And my understanding of CEDA being an independent school is it supports or develops a school, an educational program for the kids who sort of fit outside the mould of that, more typical school setting. So I don't see them, and obviously they're a registered non-for-profit. Their purpose isn't to derive profit from their operation. I see them as being genuine users, and genuinely they should be paying a lower rate. I think also, as part of what I found out, the schools actually confirmed that 20 out of the 28 students that participate in that program are actually Moonee Valley, students that live in Moonee Valley. So we sort of, in a sense, double dipping in this sense. Well, we're providing education or providing outcomes and opportunities for kids who live here, but we're also gaining significant revenue from this use. So I think CEDA is probably not where we should be looking. I do have legitimate concerns with potentially academies, for instance, academies that are associated with sporting clubs utilising pavilions on a for-profit model to make money, and they're only paying essentially less than what CEDA are paying, but they're making money. That's where my concerns lie. My concerns don't necessarily lie with CEDA. I think they do a great job, and I don't want to dismay them from speaking to us more and getting involved more across our facilities when they're available. But I think we do have a problem with academies that are aligned with sporting clubs taking advantage of the community and making a profit out of and sort of utilising community sports for their advantage. So I'd like to see officers look into this a little bit more. Perhaps when we look through the evolution of the community facilities agreements, we can look at this a little bit closer. But for the reasons I've highlighted, I can't support this only because I don't feel it's fair on CEDA, who I think do a fantastic job.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Tyson, you're the only one on my list. Councillor Sharp, would you like to close?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, I concur with Councillor Bedio. You know, CEDA do magnificent work, but should our residents be subsidising that? They got a massive community discount through COVID on their rent this past year. I'm not sure that our community want to see their rates being subsidised for education, which is not a council responsibility. And that's my issue with this. It's not about what they do. It's not about where they are. It's about the fact that any VCAL organisation, forget the name, any VCAL organisation receives subsidies from the government in order to run their programs. They then receive a really cheap council rent for 5 days of the week, which does preclude any other community group from attending or using the facility on a regular basis, because it's a school term, it's a school year, it's how they work, it's how they operate. It is a school. So my whole reasoning behind this was to A, to bring it to light, and B, to have a good conversation around what we actually want to be having our ratepayers pay for as a council. It's not about how good they are as a business or what exactly, education is paramount. But like I said, we are education providers through kindergarten, the foundation, but that's subsidised heavily by state and federal government. We don't get any subsidies. Then they're paying the cheapest rent possible because it's a community rate. And I just really feel that our community, A, should be aware of these sorts of things that are occurring, and B, I really don't think we can justify us being in a space that is not our responsibility. People can't pay their rates at the moment. We have a massive amount.
Would you like a short extension of time?
Yes, just a very short extension. I'll just finish my sentence. I've never had the amount of emails that I've had this year with people and their rates. So people are having real financial difficulty out there. Now, we can prop up an educational facility, yes, but it's not our responsibility. So that's the whole crux of this. I will reiterate, it's not about what they do, how they do it, or where they are. It's about the fact that our ratepayers are subsidising their operation. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sypek, and those against? Councillor Isa, Councillor Adams, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson. That motion is lost. Councillor Isa foreshadowed an alternative. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to move a motion that reads that Council resolves to A, make no immediate change to the current fees and charges categorisation relating to non-government education providers. B, request that the CEO completes a review of the community facility management policy, including community consultation on any proposed changes, by June 2022. And C, request the CEO to investigate and implement ways of increasing use of community facilities by school groups, such as seeking appropriate accreditation.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Can I just confirm, nod of heads, councillors are happy, understand the amendment? Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Tyson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor. This alternative motion replicates one element of the officer's recommendation, which was that no immediate change be made to the current fees and charges and categorisation relating to non-government education providers. And it also then replicates the point B around seeking a further review, but just broadens that to a review without any degree of specificity, and extends the timeline for that to allow for community consultation as officers deem necessary, depending on any outcomes of a review. And the point C is also about looking for ways in which our community facilities can be further made use of by school groups, primarily because our facilities, many of which sit idle during the day. And it's often difficult to find groups that might be able to make use of the community facilities, and it's school groups who are operating during the day who may find ways or may find these buildings useful. We understand that accreditation processes may need to take place for that to be of some use to school groups. So that's asking the CEO to explore that and see if there are ways in which council can in fact have an ongoing relationship with schools that is mutually beneficial. I do note, I noted before that there is some really good stories to tell out of this, and that, in my view, is that a school that has a really interesting model. It is a decentralised model such that it operates around a number of venues around Victoria. It's accessible to students, and it offers a program that is otherwise not available to students, and a program that's of great applicability to some students for whom school might otherwise be disengaging to the point where they actually drop out. So I'm really grateful that CEDA are in Moonee Valley, and I'm really pleased for the Moonee Valley students who can participate in the program. And I think it's a really good story that Moonee Valley is able to have a mutually beneficial relationship with CEDA such that they can make use of the pavilion and we can make use of the funds that we are given for the use of that building. I feel that the report absolutely put to bed any suggestion that schools are commercial entities. It turns for me on the use that a pavilion or the use that something is put to. Schools aren't putting the facilities to a commercial profit use. They're not-for-profit entities, and they're putting it to the use of education, which is a community benefit within their and they operate within a charitable status. That's distinguished from a commercial entity that is making a profit and using the facility to help generate that profit. And that's what the commercial definition turns on for me. And so it's really important to understand that our schools, our primary and secondary schools, are not commercial operators. That's distinguished, so that's different perhaps from a higher education RTO or an entity that might operate as a commercial in that commercial sphere, but that does not apply to our schools in Moonee Valley, the 16 of which are listed in the report, most of which are Catholic primary schools in that particular report. I do note very quickly, Mayor, that the average benchmarked charge for our casual commercial rate is $37, whereas we charge 35. The average casual commercial rate is $37. We charge $65, and that may be why many of our pavilions sit empty, and it may be something that is considered as part of this particular review. I'll leave my comments there for now, Mayor, noting that my time is up, and I'll continue at the end if needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Tyson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Nothing to add, Mayor. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Bedio.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Isa, for the motion. Sorry, just in speaking in the last motion, I sort of had an idea, so I'd like to raise an amendment if I may.
Yep, go ahead. What's your amendment, Councillor Video?
The addition of a point D to read, request the CEO to investigate, sorry, let me word, investigate the use of sporting pavilions. Sorry, I'm speaking in German just so I can get this wording correct.
Sure thing. For viewers at home, we'll just adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes to get a wording of an amendment. We'll be back shortly.
I move that an adjournment be taken, Deputy.
Sorry, it's my understanding that the chair can seek an adjournment without taking a vote. Governance, is that correct? Or do you need me to?
That's correct. The chair can.
Thank you. I'll just adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes while we work on some wording for the amendment. Welcome back to our ordinary meeting of council. Apologies for the interruption there, the adjournment. We are speaking on item 10.6, response to notice of motion 2021/29 community facility hire. At the moment, we have a motion on the floor from Councillor Isa, seconded by Councillor Tyson, who have both spoken to the motion. Councillor Bedio was speaking to the motion and has sought to move an amendment. Councillor Bedio.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I wish to move an amendment for an additional point D to this motion. That point to read, request the CEO to review the use of sporting facilities for private coaching activities. This can be included as part of the review mentioned in Part B and or within other relevant reviews.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Byrne. Councillor Bedio, would you like to speak to your specific amendment?
Yes, thanks, Deputy Mayor. I think it would make sense in undertaking this review, and as I mentioned in the previous motion that was lost, I do have some concerns around the use of sporting grounds and pavilions by private operators who may not be paying the full commercial rate whilst potentially, and I'm not sure, but potentially making a profit from that operation. I understand that coaching and academies and whatnot and school holiday programs are things that our community loves and enjoys. However, I truly feel that if it's a for-profit enterprise, that they get charged the appropriate fee. What I'm wanting to put forward and the purpose of this amendment is to give officers, I guess, the notion that we need to look at this more, and that hopefully we can get a further report back on the types of uses, the payment situation, that sort of thing, by June 2022, which is when the community facility management policies will be reviewed. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio, and apologies. I should have noted in our adjournment, Councillor Sypek is having some tech issues as well, but hopefully will be able to join us again. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm happy to support this amendment because I'm actually really interested in how the report comes back, because I would actually maybe our prices are too expensive for some commercial providers to come in. There's that side of it as well. I'm sort of thinking of the school holiday coaching programs that occur, and in other municipalities they seem to have a lot of really good regular school holiday programs that come in and use the sporting ovals, and I've seen a few of them pop up in Moonee Valley in recent times. Obviously COVID has hindered that, because you imagine a 2-week musical theatre school holiday program operating out of one of our pavilions or something like that, because at the end of the day a lot of families have parents that both work Monday to Friday and forever looking for things for kids to do, and if we're not utilising all of our spaces, maybe we don't have the pricing right, maybe we need to have it cheaper, maybe so it's not necessarily that it's that they're for profit, so we should charge them more. It could actually be seen as the other way around. Maybe they could be charged less in the really off-peak rates of school holidays 9 to 3 or I don't know. It's going to be a report back. I don't have the answers to the report. That's why we're requesting it. But I think that we should be looking for really good, exciting things for all members, all ages, all interests, for members in our community to participate in. And I think so. Thank you, Councillor Bedio. I think that it'll be really interesting to see what comes back.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Would anybody else like to speak to the amendment? Any other councillor? Councillor Isa.
Yeah, I agree, Councillor Byrne, and I think they're vexed. It's a really vexed question around what is commercial, and then what rate should council attach to that. And there's also other considerations such as community benefit. So there are multiple factors that come into the assessment of what might work as a fee and charge and what might be appropriate. And I do, as I mentioned earlier, I do feel that our casual I think it's our casual commercial rates are considerably higher than our neighbouring municipalities, and I think that is perhaps something we potentially are charging ourselves out of the market there with respect to those particular rates. So equally very interested in the sorts of discussion that this point can bring back to us. In thinking around, what does commercial mean? What does private mean? What rates are applicable when? I guess I do still just want to reiterate that point that, why schools are somewhat insulated from all of this is because of that, the nature of education being that not-for-profit exercise. And I did want to mention, saves me doing it in my closing, I did want to mention that one of the groups that isn't captured in the report are community language schools, which are non-government education providers. And I know that community language schools also have used Flemington Community Centre. So, sorry, it's not particular to the amendment. I do apologise, Deputy Mayor. But in looking at the different types of providers, the different types of uses, what is commercial, what is not-for-profit, how does this particular use fit into those assessments? There might well be some other uses that haven't been captured in the report that can also come into this review.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would any other councillor like to speak to the amendment? No. Councillor Bedio, would you like to reply? Would like to close, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Some great points by my colleagues, and probably ones that I didn't necessarily think of when I raised the amendment, but I think potentially there are ways that we can improve or support the use of our pavilions for private operators to get to maximise the community benefit. I'm conscious that we need to look into liability issues and the like when you're running a private enterprise on council land, how that operates, if that's working alongside a community sporting club. Lots of things I'd love to explore here, and I really hope my colleagues can support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Tyson, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Isa, Councillor Adams, Councillor Hodgson, and those against? Councillor Sharp. That amendment is carried and becomes the substantive. Councillor Bedio, you had 2 minutes 50 seconds left speaking to the substantive.
I think I've taken up enough of your time on this one, so thanks for supporting that one, the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Thank you, Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to express my thanks to the officers for turning this report around so quickly, as there were a number of valid concerns raised to me by our independent Catholic schools and VCAL provider that use our council facilities. The hold placed on bookings for 2022 was of particular concern, with non-government schools who are very worried about the future of the programs they facilitate as part of their curriculum and the future planning of venue locations and bookings. So now all 2022 expressions of interest bookings can resume as planned on the 11th of October 2021. I think it's very clear in the officer's report, after benchmarking analysis was undertaken and also touched on by other councillors, that the fees currently charged for non-government education providers in Moonee Valley represent fair and comparable rates. It's also noted that all Moonee Valley non-government education providers provide wide community benefit, as their purpose is to further the education of students enrolled into their programs, many of whom are Moonee Valley residents. With regard to the only non-government educator that uses a council facility that falls under the Community Facility Management Policy, CEDA, who is the largest provider of VCAL, is a registered charity and not-for-profit organisation that fills a gap in our education system with our most vulnerable teenagers who don't fit the VCE mould. In terms of social disadvantage, CEDA falls into the lowest quartile of all schools, that is state, Catholic and independent. In 2021, a total of 20 students out of the 28 students who use the facility at Cross Keys are residents of Moonee Valley. It's very obvious in this report that the fees and rates charged are very reasonable and fair, and we risk losing the booking if our charges were to increase. I welcome a full review of the Community Facility Management Policy and fully appreciate the officer's time required to do this properly. So happy that the report's going to be coming back in June 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to touch on just a couple of things for anybody who's listening along at home. And it's because it's mentioned in the report, but I'm mindful that people won't necessarily have the report in front of them. CEDA pay about $23,000 for the use. So if people are sort of thinking, how much are we talking? You know, there were COVID restrictions, COVID discounts, yes, but normally that's how much that they'll be paying. So we're not talking a few $100s here. We're talking that if they weren't in the facility and it was sitting vacant, we actually wouldn't be getting that money at all. So I would say that that would more than cover our, well, it does. It's money that we otherwise would not be getting. And the other thing that I wanted to touch on was just something, you know, action. You know, our action in MV 2040 is improve the multi-purpose nature of our sport, recreation and leisure assets to maximum usage. And I don't think that we're doing this at the moment, and we need to get better at that. And I think that we will, and we spend a lot of money on our pavilions and our grounds, and they're for everyone's use. And hopefully over the next few years and after these reports come back, we can really make that push so it really does feel like everyone in the community can have access to these facilities, and they are definitely multi-use and multi-purpose like they were designed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? No. In that case, Councillor Bedio, as the mover of the amendment, would you like a right of reply? Councillor Isa, as the mover of the motion.
There's just one small thing I forgot to mention, which is that Fairbairn Pavilion, Fairbairn North Pavilion and Walter Street Pavilion weren't listed in the 5 that are in the officer's report. And I just wonder if I'm not putting this in a motion in any way, but just noting it on the floor really that in the course of the review, it might be something that officers may wish to look at as to whether those pavilions might also be able to be captured or incorporated within this.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's Councillor Tyson, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Adams, Councillor Isa, Councillor Byrne, and those against? Councillor Sharp. And that motion is carried. That brings us to the end of 10.6, and we'll invite the Mayor back to the chair.
Thank you, councillors. Just give me one moment. It's caught me a little bit off guard. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And again, I apologise for a late conflict of interest, but I couldn't premeditate what motion was going to be put to council, and therefore the motion contained elements that I'd previously declared a conflict of interest in and therefore needed to. Item 10.7 on the council agenda is enhancing commercial areas in response to Victoria's roadmap delivering the national plan. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. I wish to move the officer's recommendation with a slight amendment. Would you like me to read out the amendment or the motion in full?
I'll go the motion in full.
No worries. The council resolves to A, note the proposed new approach of footpath trading permissions via a COVID footpath trading permit guideline and supporting checklist/declaration currently draft. Sorry, attachment 1's separately circulated. B, note the report and opportunities to enhance commercial precincts, attachment 2 separately circulated. C, requests the Chief Executive Officer to prepare for reopening across the municipality based on the proposals in attachment 2 in anticipation of state government funding, and as part of this preparation, involve councillors in a workshop to identify potential priorities in 8 days of this resolution being passed.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Isa. Councillor Bedio, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Firstly, I just want to say a massive thank you to the officers that put together this report. I know this was a really big ask. Councillor Byrne, Councillor Adams and I, having put a special meeting forth last Wednesday to provide a report back to us for this meeting, and I didn't realise that Friday was a public holiday, so we really only gave them a few days to get this report to us. But what they provided us was, I think, incredible, and I am so grateful for the work they've done. I must say, when I read this report, I couldn't stop smiling because I just got so excited thinking about what summer could look like in Moonee Valley, and the opportunity to get back out there and socialise with our community and network and go see our local businesses that have done it tough. I'm so excited with the opportunities that lay ahead. I just wanted to make a slight amendment to the officer's recommendation at the end there, just to keep us councillors involved in the workshop. We work with the community every day. We work with local business owners every day. I want to ensure that we stay informed and we can help prioritise where the investment goes with funding that is surely to be announced soon by the state government. But I really, again, want to push for officers to continue working on this. This is just the start. We need to be quick. We need to be adaptive. COVID has put many challenges in front of us, but now's our time to really be leaders and show what we're capable of and show and lead the way forward for our businesses and our community. So let's continue to be bold. Let's make some really amazing things happen. And again, I want to thank the officers for putting this report forward.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Isa, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, thank you, Councillor Bedio. Thank you to Councillor Adams and Hodgson for initially bringing this to council. And can I reiterate Councillor Bedio's enormous gratitude to the officers. And not only did they put together the report in the last item so very quickly, but they've done this one even more quickly. And we're tremendously lucky to have officers of such work ethic to enable us to proceed in this way, and very grateful. The report contains, as Councillor Bedio has said, some really exciting opportunities. And I'd love, it'd be great to do them all. It'd just be great to have the capacity to enliven our streets in the way that's envisaged, particularly in attachment 10.7.2, that, it's really like a Christmas list of different things that we might be able to do in Moonee Valley. So thank you very much for putting that appetising smorgasbord before us, and look forward to some further discussions about how we can work out which ones we might be able to prioritise. It will be quite challenging to make sure everything does work within the COVID safe regulations and within some other parameters. But again, sort of gratitude to officers for being willing to explore what the possibilities that we can perhaps carve out in Moonee Valley. I would just like to, in my final comment, just give another plug for the arts, because I think the arts they really work hand in hand with business and street life. And the more that we can offer opportunities to our local artists, whether they're musicians or actors who can pivot to some street art, whatever it might be, whether it's visual artists or performing artists that can help to beautify and enliven our streets, I think that the complementary nature of the arts in this, it just has to be tied in at every opportunity. I'd also just like to acknowledge the traders again, who have, like the artists, really suffered, and again hope that we can make use of these opportunities to thank our community and our artists and our traders for hanging in there, and looking forward to celebrating post-COVID life over summer in some of the many beautiful ways that have been detailed in the report. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Hodgson?
Thanks, Mayor. And Councillor Isa, credit where credit's due. I'll thank Councillor Byrne for being the one to bring the motion to a special meeting. I just wanted to join the shower of praise for our officers for bringing this. It's a really great report, and I think in the recommendation they have very neatly identified, a high impact, easy win with the footpath trading permit pivot. And within the report, if you do have the chance to read, some quick thinking of ways that they can shuffle in-house resources to be able to really assist our businesses and, community groups who would be wanting to hold events to be able to understand how to do that in a COVID safe way, and get those answers, those questions answered really quickly. So, we're resourcing up internally, we're exploring really creative options. I think the officers have really embraced the sentiment from that special meeting about being bold, trying new things, and not to steal Councillor Sypek's thunder of being our ever-present COVID optimist, but the silver lining of what we are facing at the moment is this opportunity to try things a different way, and our officers have really embraced that, and I look forward to being involved in what's coming next.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Byrne?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move a slight amendment, please.
Yes. What is your amendment?
So at the end of point A, so for it to read in, sorry, my screen's being funny. So at the end of the point A, for it to read, note the proposed new approach of footpath trading permissions via a COVID footpath trading permit guideline and supporting checklist / declaration, currently draft brackets attachment 1 separately circulated. And then on the end of that, with the exception that permit fees already paid will not be repaid but used within this program.
Yep. Do you want to just read just that additional, the additional words one more time for clarity for everyone?
Yep. So, with the exception that permit fees already paid will not be repaid, but used within this program.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. So Councillor Byrne's got an amendment on the floor. It's an addition to the end of point A, as read there by Councillor Byrne. I'll seek a seconder for that amendment. I think it can be you, Councillor Bedio. It's your motion. Councillor Adams. Councillor Byrne, would you like to just speak to the specific amendment?
Thank you. So there's obviously people, businesses who use footpath trading all year round and have already paid their yearly fees, which is great, and hopefully they're doing well with that, or as well as they can be in this time. But to save the administrative burden of then refunding fees, because the people with these outdoor that are using the footpaths will hopefully benefit from this program. The idea of this program, I suppose, is to try to get people who wouldn't normally trade on the footpath to then start trading on the footpath. So people who wouldn't normally do it can then get it for free. It will create a much more vibrant activity, and it will actually open up a lot more money within our coffers that we can actually put towards this program, because at the moment we're not really putting any money towards this program. We're sort of waiting for government grants until we can find a way to maybe do some shuffling, whereas this this kind of just opens that door for us a bit to say, you know, here are some really exciting, bold activities we want to do, and this is how we're going to fund it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Adams, wish to speak to the specific amendment? Any other councillor wish to speak to the specific amendment? Councillor Isa.
Can I just ask a point of clarification? I'm not sure to whom at this point, but is there, I was just trying to find in the report, is there a, have the fees for this financial year been reduced for traders who would already have paid?
Thank you, Councillor Isa. So we've got a point of clarification permitted, as it's asking fact within the report. CEO, would you be able to either answer that or direct it to the relevant officer?
Thank you, Mayor. Can you please repeat the question?
I was just trying to work out whether the footpath trading fees for 2021-22, whether there'd been a reduction applied to those. I thought I had read something in the report, but I just can't find it.
I don't believe there is a reduction. I think it is the budget was based on business as usual.
Okay, so no fee. So your belief, CEO, is no fee waivers as we've done the previous year. Thank you.
Unless people apply into the hardship program, my understanding.
Thank you, CEO.
It's also my understanding the fee implication stated in the report is based on budget.
Thank you. Councillor Isa, did you wish to speak to the specific amendment?
Look, obviously I'm a bit wary of offering some reductions to some traders and then not offering that to others. So I thought I'd read that there was a reduction already. It's good to know there's the hardship program available to traders. So that does factor into the decision. I'm interested to hear what other councillors might think about this one before reaching a final decision. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the specific amendment? Councillor Hodgson, I saw your hand up before, so I thought it was still going up. Councillor Hodgson.
Yeah, apologies, Mayor. I had a point of clarification, but Councillor Isa has bought me time to find the point in the report that mentions the cost to council, the financial implications of waiving all footpath trading permit costs and reimbursing already paid permits is estimated to be 120,000. So obviously we don't know exactly what the split there would be of the sort of the opportunity loss of people who will apply and not pay, or versus those that would get reimbursed. But and so I'm not sure that there would be an answer to the question of what would it cost, like what's that amount that Councillor Byrne, by moving this amendment, we put into the program. But I imagine it would be somewhere, I mean, just to take a guess, if you put that in half. I too am a little unsure on this one. It's not easy. I think it's a really great creative idea and way to maximise the opportunities that the officers have outlined, which obviously all draw a cost. And so in that sense, I'm supportive of it. My hesitancy is around any perceptions of unfairness, I suppose, moving forward. But I'm not sure what we might do to mitigate that, perhaps noting that the policy is in draft, and it remains in draft, but the direction given by council to consider not reimbursing. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm really torn. Much like Councillor Isa, I'm not sure which way to go on this, and appreciate anyone else's thoughts around, making sure that we are able to definitely maximise the opportunity and the funding available to creative ideas for this, without compromising on fairness.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Does any other councillor wish to speak just to this specific amendment? Councillor Tyson?
I'm happy to support the amendment, but I might foreshadow as a failure, I suppose, that perhaps different words may not be repaid but used within this program at the discretion of the CEO, potentially. But I'm happy with the amendment as it is.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Any other councillor wish to speak to this specific amendment? If not, Councillor Byrne, would you like to close?
Thank you, I will, Mayor. I suppose for me, at the end of the day, we set the budget, we were the councillors, and we have a budget that we need to balance, and we need to do what we can. And for me, I think we need to go big and we need to go bold. So I want to see things like what we can see in attachment 2, where we're potentially closing off streets, where we're potentially doing what we did at Union Square, where we're turning the Centreway into something so amazing that's never been seen before. If we don't get the money from the state government, we've got to sort of balance it somehow, and I feel like this is a fair way to do that, because otherwise it has to come from somewhere else, and I don't know what other lever we have left to pull. It's fair for the fact that people who day in, day out have budgeted that they were going to have footpath trading, and they've already decided that they're going ahead, knowing of the uncertainty of COVID times. We're trying to then encourage the people that weren't planning on doing it and sort of saying, it's only for a short period of time, but here, have a go to make our streets a bit better. Let's do it. It's a way that I think that we can make some really good changes in the city. And yes, it's never a popular thing, these things. But
apologies, could I seek a point of clarification? I'm sorry,
Yes.
Councillor Byrne.
Yes.
Through the CEO to the officers, could I just ask whether footpath trading permits are issued for the calendar year or the financial year?
Yes. So CEO, again, point of clarification regarding facts contained within the report, whether or not footpath trading permits are allocated per financial year or per calendar year.
So, your Mayor, I believe the footpath is the fees per financial year. Things like health registration and education fees usually are calendar year.
Thank you, CEO. Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Byrne, you have 40 seconds remaining on 39 seconds. Thank you, Governance, remaining on the clock.
Thank you, Mayor. As I said, I'm just trying to do this in the fairest way, and I want Moonee Valley to be the city that's in the papers for doing something bold and doing something a bit different, and this is the way that I can see us doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. So we'll put this specific amendment to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Adams, that's carried unanimously. That now becomes the substantive. We, at this stage, have had Councillor Bedio speak as the mover, Councillor Isa as the seconder. Now you're testing me. Councillor Byrne and Councillor Hodgson. Not sure what order that was in. Who was speaking? Is everyone done? Councillor Hodgson? Let me check my notes, sorry. No, all right. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd also like to thank our officers who've turned around this report around in a really short period of time. I really like the suggestions put forward to bring some vibrancy and life back to our local neighbourhoods quickly by making it easy for our businesses to operate optimally and give our residents something to look forward to as we open up. We have so much potential in our municipality. Each neighbourhood has unique characteristics and fantastic shopping strips that service its local community, and I think the officers' suggestions have captured this perfectly. I'm hoping that this does give us the opportunity, as suggested in the report, to test these ideas so that council can monitor and evaluate the outcome of these approaches for new ways to support our business community in the future. Noting that some of these ideas are more expensive than others, and we obviously have budget consequences that we need to consider, I think everyone is eagerly awaiting any state government funding announcements that we, so that we can bring some of these ideas to life. This is our opportunity in Moonee Valley to really help activate some areas and bring some excitement so that we can all enjoy outdoor dining and activities in Moonee Valley in a COVID-safe way. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Byrne, sorry, governance did have a note right there that I completely missed. You have 3 minutes of speaking time left. You've only moved an amendment. You haven't spoken. Should you wish to speak to the substantive?
Thank you, Mayor. That's okay. So thank you to, again, I'll reiterate what others said, that thank you for the officers for turning this around so quickly. It's so exciting to see this, and I know that I said this when I was speaking about the amendment, but I really want us to do something outside of the square with this. I feel Attachment 2 has so many ideas, and I'd really like to see one or two of the really different ones, like us to really take a risk. And of course there will be some people who won't necessarily like them, they won't like the loss of car parking, or there might be some disadvantages, and we might make the odd mistake, but I think it's okay to make mistakes as well. I think the word out of the past week of this is be bold, and I really hope that we stick with that, because this is a real chance that we can give our businesses the best possible chance to really thrive. And we need to take, I think we need to take some risks, and I'm talking, as in the report, shutting down streets, extending parklets, taking away car parks, doing things that people will go, wow, like changing the crossings to have different colours on them, anything that will actually attract people to the area and say, we want to shop in our local shopping strips in Moonee Valley and not necessarily go to Amazon.com and buy things online. So I think this is our real opportunity, and I reckon we absolutely go for it.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Reiser?
Mayor, I just wanted to seek a point of clarification, if I may.
Yep.
Just bear with you. The amendment that was just passed, the point A still says note. I'm just checking what the effect of, just checking we've got the, I guess the way that particular amendment will work, we've got that right, given that the verb in the preliminary verb is noting the proposed approach.
I think in terms of a point of clarification, that could only go back to the mover of the original motion, but then again, it would just be his interpretation as per your interpretation. We can't ask the CEO's interpretation.
Can we ask governance interpretation? I guess I just wanted to check that that it works, that there's not some, if governance could perhaps just look at that, the wording of that amendment, just to make sure nothing else needs to be, doesn't need any additional changes to make it work properly.
So look, I can ask the CEO if the amendment is consistent with the first part of point A, but I can't necessarily ask them what the interpretation of note would be. So I guess just through you, the CEO, is that amendment that's been added to point A, is that consistent with point A?
It is implementable, if that's a question. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Appreciate that. Councillor, Councillor Rossi, you've already spoken. That was just a point of clarification. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? No. Councillor Byrne, mover of the carried amendment, right of reply. Councillor Bedio, would you like to close?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'll just say we're currently sitting at 240 days over the past 20 or so months being locked up at home. I'm sure our constituents want to be able to, when they can, get out and enjoy the most of non-lockdown life that they can. Let's support our businesses. Let's, like Councillor Byrne said, and seems to be the buzzword for this whole motion, let's go bold. Let's do something we haven't done before. And yeah, everybody should be excited because I think we've got a really positive and happy Moonee Valley summer ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. So we'll put the substantive motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. That concludes our council reports for this evening. We now move to notices of motion. We have one notice of motion listed, so I will call on Councillor Hodgson to present her notice of motion titled Notice of Motion number 2021/30, Consultation with Local Government on Proposed Victorian Government Planning Reforms. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor, and bear with me. It's a long one. I'd like to move that Council resolves to A, note that the Victorian Government has made a number of changes to the planning system in the last 18 months and is currently considering further significant planning reform. B, seeks an open and collaborative dialogue with relevant Victorian Government departments and elected representatives to ensure that the voices of the community and local governments are represented in the consideration of any future reforms. C, strongly voice its position that Point 1, consultation with the community and with local governments on any reform proposals is important before reforms are considered or introduced. Point 2, the community's voice remains an integral consideration for planning decisions. Point 3, strong community consultation must be a core part of major planning decisions. And point 4, the community's voice is critical for ensuring a transparent planning system that strengthens local neighbourhoods and economies. Point D, calls on the Minister for Planning to include full consultation with local governments and the community before any planning reform decisions are made. Point E, requests the Mayor to write to the Minister for Planning and the Shadow Minister for Planning to advocate Council's position. Point F, requests the Mayor to write to the Treasurer, Minister for Local Government and Minister for Planning and Housing to voice concern about the proposed rate exemption for social and affordable housing and seek meaningful consultation with local governments regarding any proposal so that the real impact on local government and service delivery can be understood and alternative options considered. Point G, requests the Mayor to write to the Minister for Local Government and the Minister for Planning to ask that they consider reallocating Moonee Valley to the inner metro region for purposes of the future planning framework, including 6 draft land use framework plans, in brackets LUFPs, under the Plan Melbourne 2017 to 2050. And H, requests the CEO or delegate coordinate with other local governments in regards to advocacy.
Okay. Hodgson, everyone got that, or we need to go again? I have a seconder for the motion. Councillor Bedio. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I've made some notes because this one's quite a long one and there's a number of things to mention. So there are a number of reforms considered in the planning space at the moment through the state government, and I put forward this motion to ensure that our voice as representatives of our local community and indeed the direct voice of the community are sought out and listened to through the processes. So the motion addresses 3 different processes, but all 3 of them are linked by this request for meaningful consultation with local government. The intent of the motion is to put forward a position of council and request that our Mayor and CEO take the position to the table to have those discussions with the state government through ministers or relevant departments to have those views heard and considered in the decision-making processes. So the first few points relate to a relatively new planning reform being proposed that relates to the definition of major projects, those things that are called in for the state government to make decisions on, and the process around that. The department, the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, has been speaking to councils about the proposals at a high level, and there are just a few questions that have come up about how those might impact local government and the community, and how we might have a say in the development of any final reforms. Some of the questions are about the length of community consultation in that called-in process, how third-party appeal rights will work, and how councils will be resourced to provide an expert opinion into those processes. The motion therefore seeks to state our position, so it's to strongly state that as local government representatives, community consultation is really vital to the reform process, and ultimately the voice of the community is really critical to those planning decisions. It seeks meaningful consultation on those reforms by writing to the relevant ministers, and a number of our neighbouring councils have passed very similar motions calling for this consultation. It's really great, I think, that we will be adding our voice to that and getting some constructive conversations happening. The second process that I mentioned in the motion is a proposal that's arisen through the Big Housing Build strategy, which is considering an exemption of social and affording housing from rates, and that would, if that consideration becomes a policy, it would mean a significant loss in rates revenue for councils. The Municipal Association in Victoria has been doing some really great advocacy on this issue, and I think it's important that we add our voice to that. If approved in the way that we understand it, it would mean that Moonee Valley would be facing some pretty difficult decisions about, whether we would pass on that difference to ratepayers or find the savings elsewhere in the budget. And in my opinion, neither of those are good outcomes for our community. So the motion seeks for meaningful conversations between government and councils on this issue, so that we can understand the impacts of the change and work together to try and find a solution through alternative options or, discussion of how that would work. And again, that's the mechanism for that's through writing to the ministers. Finally, and councillor colleagues might want to add to these comments, but the final point in second to last point in the motion seeks to advocate for our request to be reallocated as a Western Metro working group, which we're currently sitting in, to be reallocated into the Inner Metro working group for the Plan Melbourne process. So Plan Melbourne 2017 to 2050 is a really huge piece of strategic planning work. We've been classified as Western Metro along with our neighbours to the west, including Melton, Wyndham, Brimbank, Hobsons Bay and Maribyrnong. But over the years, we have felt as a council that we're a little bit more, we share issues more similarly with the Inner Metro councils. I'm running out of time, so I'll leave it there and just wrap up and let other councillors speak to that. But what I really wanted to make sure through moving this motion was that, and Mayor, I'll just foreshadow a 30-second extension if that's okay.
Yep,
when the community's speaking to us about their biggest issues, so many of them come down to planning in our city, and that's been reflected in some of the debate tonight as well. We understand the need for statewide planning reform, but it's so important that we make sure that the voice of the community remains a critical part of planning decisions and central to the way that decisions are made. We need to ensure that there's a way for those who know the community best to be able to provide that expertise and have it considered through the process. So it's really important that we put out this call for, greater consultation, meaningful engagement with local governments in all of these planning reform processes, so that we can work together with state governments on solutions that we know that will work on the ground.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Bedio, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor, and big thank you to Councillor Hodgson for putting this motion together. I think this is a critically important motion. In particular for me, as Councillor Hodgson mentioned, the reallocation or the advocating for the reallocation of Moonee Valley from being considered a Western Metro, I guess, paired in the Western Metro plan under the new land use framework plans as part of Plan Melbourne 2050 into an inner metro as part of that plan. I think that's really important because it goes a long way to showing the evolution of Moonee Valley and perhaps, I guess, the evolution of Melbourne. Melbourne is rapidly expanding. We are quite a large, quite a diverse municipality when you go from the Watermurnong through to Rose Hill. But I still believe that at our hearts, our core identity is more so that it was more similar to that of the City of Melbourne, City of Port Phillip, City Yarra, compared to that of the City of Melton. So I really like to advocate for us to be part of that framework as an inner metro and be considered inner metro, so that we can have an active role to play in the development of the CBD and its urban fringe. So I think that's a really important piece of advocacy, and I really thank Councillor Hodgson for bringing that to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Isa?
Yeah, I was just looking up there while Councillor Bedio was speaking, the vision statement for the inner metro region, and it when you look at a map, obviously inner Melbourne, the inner metro area has City of Melbourne, and Moonee Valley it sort of sits surrounded by that on a map, or certainly the southern part of Moonee Valley. We are a very diverse community, but when I look at the vision statement for inner metro region, it talks about being recognised globally as an exemplar urban environment with sustainable places, mixed use form, world leader in urban environmental sustainability, with some of the world's best tourism destinations. So we do have obviously we have Essendon Airport, and we have Moonee Valley Racecourse. We have some real destinations within our municipality, and I won't read out the Western one now, but thanks so much to Councillor Hodgson for raising that. I think it's something that the emphasis on urban environmental sustainability is something that I think is really captured in that particular vision. The other part of this motion I'll just speak to really quickly, and thank you, Councillor Hodgson, for bringing together some really complicated policy reforms together in this motion, and for taking the time to get your head around all of these elements. It's really, there's a lot going on in planning, and thanks for doing that on our behalf. One of the other elements in this motion that I'm really quite passionate about is the proposal, we're not quite sure what sort of status it has, but this potential proposal to examine the treatment of social housing such that it doesn't, so that it's exempt from council rates. And it does seem a little bit mercenary to be talking about rates in this way, but at the same time, I think we really do have to make sure that we acknowledge the work that Council does to support residents in social housing and public housing. This particular change would impact Moonee Valley rates by 5% annually. Across Victoria, it's estimated to cost councils 1.6 billion years across 10 years in lost rates revenue. So it's a massive imposition really on councils. And look, when the earthquake happened last Wednesday, and I may just go over slightly here, Mayor, if that's okay. When the earthquake happened last Wednesday, the residents were very anxious on our public housing areas, understandably so, and they rang council, who offered support where we could. And I think, you know, we're here for residents from public housing and social housing. We will always want to do our very best to support residents who absolutely need the services that we're offering. And we do need the state government to recognise that and to not unfairly deny council the funding that we need in order to provide for our really, really important residents in these areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? If not, Councillor Hodgson, do you wish to close?
Mayor, just to say on the point of the inner metro to Western Metro, I think recently we have made the decision as a council group to shift our focus from the advocacy group called Lead West to join the M9 councils. And I think that decision is because a lot of the issues that we share, as we've been saying, reflect those experienced by our neighbours, more to the east. And a lot of the issues that the Western municipalities are facing in that growth corridor, just aren't truly reflected and shared by Moonee Valley. So, that was just my final point.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. We will put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. We now move to item 12, which is urgent business. And I'll ask councillors if we have any items of urgent business. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to have an item considered to be urgent in regards to obtaining some advice on the wording of alcohol restrictions within our activities and general amenities local laws.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Do I have a seconder for that urgent business motion? Councillor Bedio. So, Councillor Byrne, we first need to obviously accept it as urgent business before we move to the actual motion. So, did you wish to speak to its urgency?
Thank you, Mayor. I will. So obviously we're in a very interesting time at the moment with roadmaps and whatnot getting out of COVID, and sometimes things come to light between a strategic briefing and the meeting, and therefore, which otherwise would potentially be brought up as notices of motion. But due to the roadmap and the public wanting us to be able to get going as quickly as possible, I feel like this is something that should be considered as urgent and not waiting until the next fortnight, because every fortnight at the moment is obviously crucial for people's mental health and well-being, and this is something that we actually need to get sorted out fairly quickly.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Bedio, wish to speak to the urgency?
I concur with Councillor Byrne. Nothing further to add.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Any other councillor wish to speak to the urgency? If not, we'll put to the vote of accepting an item of urgent business. Those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Councillor Byrne, would you now like to present the motion to be considered this evening?
I will. Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move that Council resolves to request the CEO to bring a report to Council on the 12th of October 2021 detailing outcomes of legal advice on the wording of alcohol restrictions 4.19 within the Activities and General Amenities Local Law 2018 to 2028, subject to legal advice, officers to include in the report details of the review and consultation requirements if amendment to item 14.19 alcohol restriction areas of the Activities and General Amenities Local Law 2018 to 2028 is deemed to be required. Officers to also include in the report any further consideration with respect to health, safety and amenity. And yes, that's all.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Bedio. Councillor Byrne, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. It just came to light that we needed to make sure what was advertised on our website lines up with what is in our local laws. We're obviously going to be having a lot more outside activities going on that may or may not include alcohol, and we just need to make sure that our messaging that we can communicate really clear messaging in terms of what's allowed in and around our city. I think that last dot point that the officers to also include in the report any further considerations to respect to health and safety and amenity is important. I don't want to blow this report up, make it anything bigger or crazy. We know what we do safely in Moonee Valley. We know that we have various areas that you can potentially have a wine and whatnot. So let's just wait for the report to come back, and then we can make sure we communicate this clearly to the community.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Bedio, wish to speak to the motion? Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, Councillor Hodgson.
Oh, sorry, Mayor. I just wanted to say, we are in very uncertain times, and anything I think that we can do to bring clarity and certainty is something I support.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Someone did speak, Councillor Byrne. Would you like to close? I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. The next item of business on the agenda is confidential reports, and there's one listed this evening. So, councillors, I'll shortly ask for a motion that the meeting be closed to members of the public in accordance with section 66(2) of the Local Government Act 2020 to allow for consideration of confidential information under the following section. Section 3(1)(f), personal information being information which, if released, would result in the unreasonable disclosure of information about any person or their personal affairs. The report and attachment includes personal information on the Audit and Risk Committee. Councillors, can I have a motion? Just got to put your hand up. I've read it out. Councillor Tyson, a seconder. Councillor Hodgson, all those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. So as we're now moving to confidential items, that is where we will leave the live stream for this evening. We thank you for joining us online, and if you wish to tune in, our next ordinary meeting of council will be held on Tuesday, the 12th of October at the usual time of